right, so again, thank you all for joining us. Today's presentation is how to ace the phone interview. And I just want to say up front that we're keeping the same topic, but we've changed speakers. Our original speaker, Cynthia Wright, got a job. So good for Cynthia. She got a job and she got 3 days notice. But so she let me know on Thursday that she wouldn't be able to make it today. But Stacy is more than capable of filling in. She is tremendous. So I am going to read you Cynthia's program description, and then I'm going to introduce Stacy. So, ever wonder why telephone interviews and informational interviews are so popular and are tools that are frequently used by job seekers? In this presentation, we'll discuss how to successfully navigate and be successful using both the telephone interview and the informational interviews to get you close to a great offer. You'll learn why they're successful, how to use them as tools to find out more about an industry or company, and why these two types of interviews are some of the key components of a successful job search. And today's talk is led by Stacy Thompson, the fantastic, phenomenal Stacy Thompson, who's a workshop facilitator at Mass Hire Lowell Career Center. Stacy has talked to both of my groups before and always does a wonderful job. So all 35 of us on the line, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Stacy for joining us here today. And Stacy, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
All right. Well, first of all, I have to say I need to come here all the time because the amount of accolades and I have to tell you, I'm really actually, I don't get tongue-tied very often, but I have to say I appreciate all of you for your very kind words. I really put my effort into making sure that people feel heard and appreciated and valued when they're with me and the time that they're with me. So thank you for allowing for me to kind of pitch hit today. It's an honor to be with you all. I've been doing this work for a long time. I won't tell you how long because you'll have an idea how old I am. But before working at Mass Hire in the capacity that I do, I was actually a recruiter for many years. And so I'm going to be able to give you kind of an interesting vantage point. I do welcome any and all questions regarding this, or if there's a question that you feel kind of a little bit outlying this, but it still kind of hits to your presentation, feel free to send that my way. As Robert said, he'll be kind of looking at that and then send those to me as well. Hopefully I do not bumble the sharing the screen functionality, but let's do that right now. See that. Hopefully you guys are able to see that. Everybody's able to see that? Okay, fantastic. Yeah. All right, so you know, again, the telephone interview is a really interesting interview, and so I'm going to go through it, and I do want you to make sure that you are comfortable asking me any questions, because there's so much that really goes into having a good and an efficient telephone interview, and I don't think that sometimes people are really kind of putting all the energy behind doing their due diligence to make sure that they're getting kind of their point across. Remember, anytime you have the ability to reach out to an employer, no matter what style it is, it has to be game time. So you have to make sure that you have put your whole heart in making sure that you're really focused and driven to make sure that it's successful. So for me, it's always about strategy. So today we're going to go over the purpose of the telephone interview. I'm going to give you some tips. We're going to talk about what employers want to know, because obviously that's the most important thing. You have to make sure you're kind of meeting their need. We're going to also go over some questions you should anticipate, as well as questions you should ask. Having been a recruiter, I will tell you, if you leave an interview without asking a question, you basically kicked yourself. Okay, so I know that sometimes you go through the whole process and you feel like maybe they've asked or answered a lot of your questions prior to you asking a question, but you always want to have that last question kind of just lying around that you could potentially throw in at the last second. Then we're going to go over some closing tips, and I'm actually going to hint on Skype just a little bit, but it's more along the online interview because, and the reason why I'm doing that is because, believe it or not, the telephone has been something now used in that capacity where people are even doing FaceTime for interviews. So I'm going to kind of talk about it from that perspective as well. So I'm going to ask you guys a poll question. It's simply something that you guys can either write your answer in the question box, but I want you to think about this. When was the last, or answer this, when was the last time you had a telephone interview? So is it in the last month, 2 months to a year ago, 1 to 5 years ago, or over 5 years ago? I'm just going to kind of look to see the general. Okay. Okay, so again, lots of you have had different experiences, right? Many of you have had recent ones. For those of you who have not had an interview, or especially a telephone interview recently, you're going to note that the telephone interview has changed dramatically. And so that's something I definitely want you to feel more confident about. A lot of people aren't, really prepared for what to expect or anticipate, and you're going to leave today much more confident about what to anticipate. So this is just a little blurb about me, what I do. I'm a certified professional resume writer, certified MBTI instructor, certified educator in personal finance, and I'm the brand ambassador for our location. But the thing that I want people to walk away from with this is I have to know, regardless of all of my, accolades, if you will, or my titles, I have to know as an individual person, if I'm a job seeker, how do I present all of the things? How does somebody walk away with an understanding of my value? So for every interview, regardless of style, what they want to know is your value. So are you sharing that over the telephone? For a lot of people, the telephone interview is the most difficult interview. And it's because you don't have a way to really kind of get a vibe for the person. You don't have the ability to be in their presence. So it makes it a lot more challenging, and it makes it a lot more difficult. And as I said today, you're going to leave with a lot of tools to make yourself feel a little bit more comfortable and confident. All right, it's time for another question. And this question is, which of these people can conduct a telephone interview? So you can pick all that apply. So if it's all, you can just write all. If you feel like there's only a few on there that you think can conduct them, or do conduct them, I should say. Okay. So I see all these answers coming in fast and furious. Oh, I see the numbers climbing. You guys are, I love this. You guys are participating, and I appreciate that. Anybody who's ever been in a webinar or anything else with me knows I love participation. So this is the thing. Typically, people are anticipating on a telephone interview a specific type of a person. So they're either expecting, that person who is like the HR representative, or maybe like the low level clerk, or whatever the anticipation is. I want you to understand very clearly that anyone can actually conduct a telephone interview. So when you're interacting with this person, you can't kind of compartmentalize them to be, oh, well, this is just this person. Understand this. If you don't get past the telephone interview, you don't move forward in the interview process. So regardless of who is actually speaking to you, or regardless who you're interacting with, you have to make sure you're putting it all out there. You have to make sure they walk away with a very concrete idea of who Stacy is, who you are. Okay. So is it common that the CEO of a company will conduct a telephone interview? No, but it does happen. Sometimes, and it could be, sometimes they get sick of, who is hired, and they're like, you know what, you guys are picking horrible candidates. Let me get more invested in this. Or if it's like a kind of a more small mom and pop shop, it's their baby. So they want to be a little bit more invested in it. So again, you have to be prepared that anybody could be calling you. And again, if there are any questions, make sure you send them my way. So the first thing I try to tell people when I talk about the telephone interview is not to be fooled. It is an interview just like all others. And as I mentioned before, it is the most important interview in the interview cycle. Again, when the telephone interview was first created, it was literally 10 to 15 minutes. That was kind of what it was. And the purpose of it at that point was, let's figure out if Stacy knows the industry. Let's figure out if she knows kind of the buzzwords. Does she know, how to conduct herself in a way that we feel like would be a good representation of the organization. Basically, is she even keeled person? Because they're trying to assess that a little bit as well. After they kind of made the assumption, or kind of came to the conclusion that, okay, Stacy knows her stuff enough for us to pass her along to the next step, that's what they did. However, now you could be on a telephone interview for over an hour easily. And for those of you who are not talkers, you don't like talking on the phone, which I kind of lived those years much younger, you know, in my 20s. But now when I'm in my not so 20s, it's not as enjoyable for me anymore to be on the phone for long periods of time. So the problem is not just being on the phone, but you have to be on, right? You have to present well, you have to be really present in the conversation. You have to sometimes be a little bit kitschy or funny. There's a lot, right, that goes into that without being able to see someone. So that makes it a bigger challenge. The other thing that you have to make sure you always remember is that all size companies are using telephone interviews. So it's not just the bigger corporations, it could be anybody. And as I mentioned to you before, not only recruiters will call. So you have to kind of change the mindset. Because I've definitely, I remember when I first started out as a recruiter, there were people that definitely didn't take me seriously. They're like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. She's just, you know, the hired person that's gonna, you know, basically make sure I know what I'm talking about. But again, you have to remember, if I, one, don't think that you're giving me the right energy. So for example, and I'll be entirely honest, I have friends right now that are still recruiters, and they've said to me, Stacy, a huge concern of ours is not the skill level. We can find people with the skill. It's people's personality matches. They said, you know, people have come across as really arrogant, you know, using words like clearly or obviously, or, you know, they come across as, you know, lacking patience, that type of a thing. And so that's really been something they're paying attention to. So it's, again, not just about you having great skills. Lots of people right now that are unemployed, as you well know, have great skills. It's so much more. They're looking for the full package. So you have to remember, even over the phone, they are assessing that. Okay. Is there any questions so far, Robert? Are we good? You're muted.
I'm muted. Sorry. We appear to be good. No questions so far.
Okay. All right. So first tip, always answer the phone professionally. This seems like a common sense tip, but if you're anything like me, as a perfect example, when my siblings call me, I answer the phone, what? There's no like greeting. There's no like hello. It's just what? Because again, we just get used to having conversation in that way. The problem is we're not having a lot of formal conversation with anybody at this point, right? A lot of our conversation is on our cell phones, just picking them up, running here and there. And so sometimes we forget about being professional when we do things like pick up the phone. Like I've heard people say, who is this? When they pick up their phone, right? And it may be because you're getting scam call after scam call after scam call, and you're kind of sick of it at that point. But again, it could be like the person from the company you're interested in, and they're kind of like, oh, forget it. Okay, so you just have to be mindful of that. The other thing is smiling as you talk. You know, some of us, and we should all be very well aware of ourselves, right? Because that's important on the interview. But smiling as you talk actually changes the tone of your voice. So if you know your voice comes across as flat, which means like no affect, and people have told you that, then that's something you want to make sure you think about. You know, making sure there's like highs and lows in your voice, because some people come across as straight flat all the way across, and that's something that you would want to avoid. Then the last thing that I'm going to mention on this slide is about building rapport. Building rapport can be challenging. And the reason why building rapport can be challenging is that everybody has a different personality. And so not everybody's going to be able to vibe, especially because you cannot see the person, right? So what I will tell you is there are certain things always to avoid. No sex, no drugs, no rock and roll, no politics, right? All those are political hotbeds and or just horrible, you know, things to bring in. So none of those things you want to bring into the conversation. But you know, people get sick and tired of talking about the weather. So you could talk about, you know, something that's happening in sports, because there are actually sporting things happening now. But you want to keep it very light. And that's why weather typically tends to be the easiest thing. You can talk about the season changing, those types of things. But anything that's controversial or could even be perceived as controversial, you're going to want to try to avoid at all costs. Okay. I will say this also, sometimes people try to be funny. Not everybody's sense of humor is the same, right? I'm a very sarcastic person, and I was saying this, I had many of the people that are on today were on my my networking event last Thursday, and I literally, I'm very sarcastic, but I have to be cognizant that not everybody can appreciate that, right? And not everybody knows me, so they may think I'm just a jerk. So again, it's really about measuring the fact that you may think what you're saying is funny and the person that's receiving it may not be impressed at all. So you have to kind of think about those things as well.
Stacy, we do,
and it's really the purple part that's the most important. It talks about a warm voice and a sense of humor. So again, it can go a long way, but you really have to know your audience. If your audience is kind of like, hi, Stacy, how are you doing today? Just gonna ask you a few quick questions. They don't want to have like joke time. There's no like, you know, let me tell you a quick joke. They're about their business and they're just get in, get out. So for those people, you might say, I'm so excited to talk to you today. And then just kind of go into the interview. You're not going to really try to win them over with your personality because that's not even something you're factoring in, quite frankly. But again, I do get that the telephone interview is very stressful because of the fact that you cannot see tone of voice. You can't really get an expression. And that does make it a little bit harder for people. Unfortunately, if you have a flat voice and your voice kind of comes across as robotic, then people think you're not as interested in a job. I remember this one person I was interviewing and they said to me, so Stacy, I'm really excited to be here today. And, you know, I'm really great with people. And as you can see, you know, people have called me the life of the party. And I'm thinking, who is he talking about? Because your voice has not ebbed or flowed. It hasn't gone up or down. I mean, nothing. There's zero energy behind your voice. So you may be describing someone else, but it's not you. Okay. So just make sure what you're saying matches how you're delivering what you're saying.
Stacy, we do have a few questions.
Excellent. Yay.
When answering the phone, should I acknowledge that I know who is calling if I have caller ID?
No. It's kind of, I mean, it's not that it's a bad thing, but it would be, imagine if somebody's call. I mean, if it's my friend, then I'm like, all right, Robert, what's going on? That's one thing. But if it's like Robert calling from Tewksbury Library, and I've never met him before, to be like, hey, Robert, what's going, is weird, right? It just comes across as a little odd. So no, I would not say that.
And James would like to know, are phone interviews generally scheduled or do they call out of the blue, or both?
Both actually. So if you're fortunate, some company will schedule it with you, right? They'll schedule a time and a date, which is fantastic because you want to be prepared, right? So that's really ideal. There are some companies that will see your resume and they want to call you before somebody else steals you. So they're going to call right away in those instances. But this is what I always try to say to people. You know, I have a friend who's a recruiter right now, and when he calls people, he will actually typically, and this is before the pandemic, he would actually call people early on a Saturday morning, anticipating that they'd be home. But as I just mentioned, a telephone interview could be an hour long. So I don't know about you, but when I get up first thing in the morning, I have to go to the bathroom. So I could not hold having to go to the bathroom for an hour and talk to somebody on the phone. You know, it's just, one, I'm not going to be focused. Two, I'm going to be no good to anyone, right? So you want to make sure that you control the setting as much as possible. Don't make them wait all day. You could call and say, hey, so excited to speak to you. I'm actually wrapping up a conversation. Can I give you a call back in half an hour? You could do that. You could let it go to voicemail, you know, do what you have to do, get your coffee, get all your documentation out, because that's the other benefit is nobody can see you. So you can have like your documentation all spread out, your resume, your cover letter, research, your list of accomplishments. You can have all that out and kind of prepared for you to use as your cheat sheets. So I always tell people, control that environment as much as possible.
Excellent. That's it for questions for now, Stacy.
Okay, excellent. So some additional tips as far as the telephone interview is concerned is you really have to control your background noise. Now, this is an additional challenge that people have had, especially since the pandemic, because you're trying to do that, but you have people always at home, right? They're always there. And so that can be an additional challenge. But what I try to tell people is immediately, if you already know that that's a situation, when you get on the phone, you just, you know, say, really excited to talk to you today. So I tried to find, you know, the place that we wouldn't be interrupted, but, you know, I am working from home with people in the house. So kind of give them that intel. So if your kid screams in the background, they're not like, what in the world is going on? You don't have to tell them that you have kids at home. You don't have to tell them anything like that, because then again, sometimes additional judgments are put on that. But you can just say family. I always tell people use family as a general statement. So what are some of the things that you should try to control as far as background noise? Your pets. I have to tell you, I've had so much, I mean, my sister was doing a Zoom, and her coworker's dog was going insane. It was like barking incessantly to the point where it's like every other word was a dog bark. So you really couldn't even, you couldn't even get through it. Like it was just like, something that really hampered the conversation. A loud AC, we're obviously getting away from that right now, but when heating units for some people come on, those are things that can be really loud. Washer and dryer, those things sound like rockets when they get really going. Traffic, if you live in a busy area, you want to try to insulate it as much as possible. People, so, maybe you have somebody in the house that listens to the TV at 1,000. Potentially that's something you would want to try to control. The phones, I will tell you, all your ringers need to be off. So fax machine ringers are super loud and annoying. Other phones you may have, so you want to control those as well. The other thing is to try to stand while you're talking. And this is for people, especially for those of you who are on this or are watching and are softer spoken. When you stand, it actually allows for your diaphragm to expand, which means that more air gets pushed out, making your voice actually increase in sound. So for those of you who know that that's an issue, then that's something. But the other additional reason why you might want to stand is you can get some of that nervous energy off of you, right? So you could be pacing, and then if they ask you a question, kind of stop over your resume, cheat sheet, answer the question, then continue pacing. So it allows for you to get some of that nervous energy off of you if you're the type of person that doesn't like sitting still, especially if you could be on the phone for an hour. Listening carefully and asking the caller to repeat is essential. Never answer something you think that they said. So you're like kind of just taking a shot in the dark. And the reality is this: it's a telephone interview, which means reception could be bad. There could be a lag. One or both of you may have people on speakerphone, which obviously increases those probabilities. If you're using your cell phone, you could be in a dead zone. I mean, there's a lot that goes into a telephone interview and it not being as successful just auditorily. So that's something that you also want to make sure you've I try to tell people, try it beforehand. Like ask people, you've been on the phone and you walk to a certain area of your house and then people are like, hello, hello, hello. So you need to avoid those particular areas. Make sure that your cell phone, if you're using your cell phone, is fully charged. I've had people in the middle of a conversation and then their phone just dies, right? So make sure that that's something that you've also prepared for, or have it plugged in. I mean, you could be sitting, have it plugged in, but you want to make sure you have good bars on your cell phone and all of that. Asking the caller to repeat is essential if you did not understand what they're saying, right? Now, this is the thing, and I try to express this to everyone. Everybody you've ever heard speak language has an accent, okay? Every single person has an accent. Now, the accent you're hearing may be unfamiliar to you. And so people will say that person has an accent, but so do you. Because I guarantee you, if you were to go to, Georgia right now, saying ka and pak, they would immediately know that you're from Massachusetts or New England. So the reality of it is we just need to simply say, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch what you were saying. Could you repeat that for me? If there's somebody like me who speaks quickly, you would say, I'm sorry, could you say that a bit slower? People like me, we know we speak fast. So it's not something, you're not being offensive. But if you said slow down motor mouth, then obviously we have an issue, right? So it's really about in how you're stating what it is you need to get across. And then, as I said to you before, feel free to have what I call professional aids or cheat sheets. Have your resume out. They can't see anything you're doing. So, I mean, for me, for example, I don't have it now, but I've been teaching other people to do webinars. And one of the things I've said is you can have stickies all over your computer screen. Nobody can see them. So if you need to, have a sticky that says, look at the camera, to remember to look at the camera, then write that down. So the same thing would be true of what I would say to you. Have a list of your accomplishments. I think that's a huge deal. What are the things that you're proud of that you've done at work? Have that list written down. Any questions that you have, you should obviously have those in front of you, because one of the things people do is they rely too much on their memory when you're in a position where you're nervous. If you're nervous, and this happens to me, even when I'm having a discussion, I like to say discussion instead of argument, right? Sounds better. But when I'm having a discussion, I write down what I want to talk about, because what happens is you can get into the conversation and then totally forget what you wanted to ask. So it's important for you to have that. Have a listing of questions, and maybe, you know, as they're answering some of the questions, you check them off because you don't want to ask them a question they already answered. So that's another big thing. All right. So some more tips: don't babble. For those of you who are talkers, right? Like, just what happens is on a telephone interview, people get nervous, right? So because you get nervous, and there's a point in time where they'll ask you a question, you'll answer the question, and then there is silence. So people get super nervous, and we start creating our own narrative, our own whole story. In our brain, we're like, they didn't like what we said. They didn't hear what we said. I should add more. That was stupid. I mean, we go through this whole thing, and the person is just literally writing down what you said. Like, there's nothing more than that happening. But again, we create something else. So what people do when they're nervous is they start talking again. So it's like you answer the question, you're done, then there's blank air, and you feel you have to fill all of that with chit chat. Don't. Okay. There are times where you might want to add a little something extra, but the need to constantly talk, what it does is it actually puts the person writing down information at a deficit, because I have to keep writing if you keep talking. Okay. Do ask questions during the interview. So similarly to how I said to Robert, you know, at the beginning, he asked, you know, Stacy, how do you like to run it? Do you want to have it where people can ask questions? And I said, yes. Reason is this. I have literally conducted interviews, and I remember one specific interview that I was doing, and I said at the end, so do you have any questions? And this person said, yes, I have 7 questions. You are not going to ask anybody 7 questions at the end of an interview. It's just not going to happen. Okay. So if you have that many questions, you want to kind of, you know, push them in and through the interview, weave them in. So let's say, as an example, they get on the phone, they say, really excited to talk to you, Stacy. Have a great opportunity. You know, the position's been open for a little bit. Maybe one of your questions is, why is the position open? So ask them then. You don't have to wait to the end of the interview. You could say, well, I'm actually glad you mentioned that. Why is the position open? It's really about you being more comfortable with the fact that a telephone interview or any other interview is not one-sided. I've gone on interviews, and after, I'm like, absolutely not. I am not working there. Don't like the person, didn't like what they were saying. No, thank you. So understand that it is, you know, a dual thing that's happening at that same time. So you want to actually, you know, get them to answer some of the questions, because maybe they say something like, well, you know, it's just been really challenging finding the right person. Typically that means whomever you're working with is very difficult to get along with. So it's important for you to hear that, and then you're able to say, oh, okay, thank you. And you're like, let me catalog that away. But you want to kind of cycle them throughout. Then the other thing is, be prepared at all moments, because literally the interview could happen at any time. As I mentioned to you before, first thing in the morning, I would not pick up the phone. I get it. People get panicked, right? You see, like, oh my gosh, Kronos is calling me and I've been trying to get in there, and I have to pick up the phone right away. But I'm in a Walmart parking lot. That's not a good call. Do not pick up the phone, because I will tell you, as soon as you pick up the phone, somebody's going to crash their cart into your car, or somebody's going to honk their horn incessantly. And then you're going to be like, oh my gosh, they're going to think that I'm nuts, right? So you want to make sure you control the setting as much as possible. I've had people say, oh, I'm going to take, you know, the call here or here. That's just not, you want it to be isolated or insulated as much as you can possibly do. Okay. All right. So some of the things you want to do is for me, any interview, the way to be the most successful at any interview or on any interview is by being ready. And how do you do that? You have your documentation ready and you practice. So the things you want to get ready as far as documentation is have your resume. Now, one of the things many of you may or may not be aware of is when you write your resume to a company now, your resume has to be customized. Okay, writing one generic resume and just sending it everywhere, those days unfortunately are way gone, beyond us now. So when you are having the phone interview, you want to make sure you have the correct resume in front of you, the one you've customized for that particular job. Okay, so that's the first thing. You want to have a cover letter. If you send the cover letter to the company, the same thing, the cover letter for the specific job. And then you want to have any company materials, any, if you've done any research on the company, anything like that, you want to have that accessible. The next thing is about knowing your personal commercial. And I know that you guys work on this, and this is really just about your presentation. You might call it the elevator pitch. They're very similar. Elevator pitch is 30 seconds. Personal commercial is about a minute. Biggest difference is that the personal commercial has a personal element in it. So it's the why I do what I do, the motivational component of your introduction, if you will. So you need to be able and be confident sharing that. If I were to unmute one of you right now, I'd want to know that you could do this. Could you introduce yourself very succinctly in less than a minute and be able to express, who you are, what your skills are, which means your value, an accomplishment, and why you'd be a good fit for my organization. I would need to know that you could do that in a minute's time. And again, that takes for you practice. And then having a list of accomplishments. And the reason why is, let's say, for example, one of the skills you keep talking about is leadership. Do I believe you're a good leader because you're telling me? No. I believe you're a good leader because you give me examples of times when you have shown or exhibited leadership. So I need to see accomplishments that support your skills. All right. So that's the documentation. On the practice side, you have to be prepared for tough questions. People are expecting still like, Stacy, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And that's lovely if you get those questions, but more often than not, you're getting grittier questions. So if you are a Scrum master, for example, they're going to ask you specific questions about working with it. And you may not be prepared for that. You're thinking, this is just the introductory telephone interview. They're not supposed to ask me real questions, right? They're also going to ask you questions specifically about conflict. That's a huge issue for companies now. They want to hire people that are going to kind of meld into what they already have going on. So they're going to ask you, when was the last time you got in a conflict with a colleague or your manager for that matter? Tell me about a time you failed. These are tougher questions. And so you have to be prepared by not just winging it, because it never makes sense to me. People will say, well, Stacy, I've had interviews before, so it's not a big deal. It is a big deal because you only get kind of that one shot. So you want to make sure you've done everything to position yourself. Practice before you have a telephone interview on the telephone. So when I tell people to practice for an interview, I mean, you need to practice in the same style of the interview you're going to have. So if you're going to have a telephone interview, have a friend, have your family member call you even if from like upstairs and downstairs or whatever. You want to make sure that you have the feeling of not knowing what their face looks like as they ask you questions, not knowing the order of the questions. You want to still have that same, like that pit in your stomach of having to perform without kind of having that benefit of seeing someone. And then again, make sure you have a list of questions you want to ask. And again, it could be people ask, how many questions do you need to ask? It's not really so much about having a need to ask several questions. It's just about making sure you have at least one or two questions that's really strong, that shows you've really paid attention or you've done your research. I've had people ask me 2 or 3 questions, and that's more than sufficient. So any questions? Are we still good? I'm going to continue on.
We do have a question. Michael says, I've been confronted in phone interviews with the first question being, how is my current job going? And I'm out of work. And how much do I expect to earn?
Yep.
I consider these attempts to get me cheap. How should I respond to such questions if they are the first ones asked?
Don't you love when they hit you with like something that just like is like a gut punch? So this is the thing. Michael, fantastic questions. First and foremost, when somebody asks you, what are you doing for work? I would say I'm looking for my next best opportunity. So, that's for people who are working and are still looking for their next best opportunity, my new step or the next step in my employment career. So first of all, don't feel ashamed that you're not employed. Several people are not employed, as you have very well, noticed. At the end of the day, it's really always about recycling back to skill, right? It's always about kind of going back to that. As far as the salary question, and I believe it was coming up pretty soon in my presentation, that is definitely going to be a question that is asked of you in the initial phone screen or phone interview. And it will go something like this. Hey, Stacy, really liked your resume. I don't want to waste your time. What are you looking at for salary? And it has nothing to do with me, right? They don't care about me at this point yet. They don't know me, but they make it sound like it's about you. There are a few ways you can answer that question. Okay. So some people will kind of already know in their brain, they'll know a range that they want to present. But this is the problem. And this is where you have to be abundantly careful. If they're talking to you and this is the first time you're interacting with this organization, and more than likely you applied and the job, the ad that you saw was probably garbage, right? Because some of these ads are horrific. They give you like no information. It's like, hi, we're looking for a project manager. Okay, that's great. So is everybody else. But it's not really giving you any true meat of the position. Typically what I try to tell people is to kind of push back on that. So what I have, kind of told people to do, one, you can give the range if you're comfortable with that. The other thing you can do is say, I'm really excited about this position. Could you give me more information about the role so that I could give you an accurate response? So that's another way you can handle it. What I have personally done is said, really excited about this position, would love to learn a little bit more about it, and would love to know what you have set aside for my skills and my experience, or what you've budgeted for my skills and my experience. Now, the reason why I'm very specific about saying it that way is because I don't care, for example, I see there's a Joe on here. I don't care what you're paying Joe. That's great. Joe may be a fantastic candidate and we may have the same background, but I want to know what you're going to be paying Stacy. Okay, so from my background and my experience. So that's what I've done. Hopefully that answers your question, Michael. All right, so what do employers want to know? These are really crucial things that when they're doing the telephone interview, this is what they're trying to get to the heart of. One, are you interested and enthusiastic about the position? And people will say, well, Stacy, I applied. Shouldn't they know that I'm interested and enthusiastic? No. I've applied for jobs that I was like, I don't know if I'm really all that excited, but let me see what they have to say, right? So they don't really truly know that you're interested in the position until you actually speak to that. But as far as criteria, what are they looking for? Can this person do the job? Which means, do you have the skills, the know-how, all that, maybe certifications? Do you have a licensure if that's something that you need? Do you have the degree if that's what they're looking for? The second thing is, do you want to do the job? Now, this is really important for those of you who have been managers or supervisors, and you're now looking to be individual contributors. This is a question that they really kind of tap into. And the reason why they tap into it is because people that have been managers for a long period of time, and maybe you don't want to do that anymore. You don't want to hear people's complaints. You don't want to deal with that. You want to do your work and go home. But the thought for employers is this person, one, probably doesn't even remember how to be an individual contributor, or two, they're going to be bored out of their minds. And so they're going to be coming to me in the next month and saying, so Stacy, do you have anything else for me to do? Anything? I can do this. I can do this. And we're like, no, we hired you to do this. And this is what we want you to do. So they want to know that you're going to do the job that you are actually hired to do and not look for something else. I mean, at least initially. And then the last one is, will this person fit in? Now, every single company has what's called a corporate culture. And so they want to make sure that you are going to be able to fit into that. So a lot of the questions that they may ask you on the telephone are, about, how did you like your last company, or what type of company do you feel like you actually, you work best in, that type of a thing, because they're trying to make sure that, and again, it could be that they have, maybe they already have a loudmouth and they're like, we can't have two loudmouths. We need somebody who's going to balance that person out, or somebody who takes over the meetings all the time. And they don't want that. They want somebody who's going to, be a little bit more even keeled as far as that's concerned. So there's a lot. And it could be, they need more women. They need more people of color. They need more, LGBTQIA plus. So it could be lots of different things that they're considering in that, but that's kind of where they're going, where they're getting with that one. Will you fit in? And this is where this one comes in. Can we afford you? So I'm not sure if any of you have used a salary calculator, but I highly suggest you do. And there are lots of different salary calculators. The one I usually have people use is salary.com. It's been around for the longest. It's kind of the most tried and true. But you can find salary calculators on Glassdoor. There's one on LinkedIn. payscale.com. There's lots of different options to utilize. The reason why I sometimes suggest people use two are to see how starkly different they may be. But the reason why I particularly usually suggest salary.com is because it's really specific. So you could say, for example, from going from Tewksbury to Chelmsford, how much I might be making differently, which is a really short and small geographical space. But it also gives you the option of talking about things like benefits and based on your education and how that changes. So you're going to see like a little bell curve, and in it, it'll tell you at 10% into my career, 25, 50%, so on and so forth. So you'll see how much you should be making. Now, the reason why this is really important, and I will say for those of you who have not been unemployed for a long time, this is like your first time in a long time, you may go through what I call sticker shock. Because some of you made a huge amount, a great salary, right? A really, really solid salary. And you did so for two reasons. One, because you worked for a company that had that money to pay you and what we call actually overpaying, right? It's not like even if you knew you were overpaid, you weren't going to go to the boss and say, you're paying me too much. Can you kind of dial that back, right? But now the problem is you're out and you're currently job seeking. And now you're going to note that unfortunately, every job you've seen is lower than that amount. So that's why I tell people to go to a salary calculator, because at least you'll have an idea. You won't feel insulted. I've had people say, Stacy, what they offered me was insulting. And sometimes it is. But if you're doing your due diligence and you already know what to expect with the salary, then you're not as offended. You kind of are emotionally and mentally prepared to see the number they may present to you. All right. So these are some questions you should anticipate. And I will tell you, you know, they're going to vary. And there are some questions, by the way, that are on here that really shouldn't be asked of you. So I'm not sure if you guys are aware, in the state of Massachusetts, it's actually illegal for a company to ask you what you were making before. And some people don't know that. And so what will happen is you'll go on an interview and they'll say, so Edward, how much were you making? And Edward just blurts it out, right? Because he thinks he has to tell them how much he was making before. Whereas basically what you want to do is kind of redirect that conversation and say, well, what I'm looking to make is between this and this, right? So as opposed to answering their question, you're responding with another question. So the light is shining on me right now. It feels like I'm like having a heaven lighting. I don't know what's going on. The sun just came out of nowhere. So yeah, I'm not an angel, but the lighting is describing me as such. So in any event, some of these questions, and Robert, do I have any questions before I go into the questions?
Not really. There are some comments, though, you might want to address.
Okay.
You know, what happens if you ask for a range and they say they don't have a salary range?
And it does happen, which is it's not true. Two things. Sometimes they're not released to tell you the salary range. They know that there's one. And that was me when I was kind of a young recruiter. They didn't give me any power whatsoever. So if they, and again, this is me answering as Stacy. I can't tell you what to say or what to do. But when that has happened to me, I've literally said to them, well, I'm really excited about the position. When you figure out what your range is, please let me know, because I would love to continue that conversation. So I kind of shut them down immediately. I'm like, okay, if you're not going to answer, then we're not going to answer. And that's just going to be what it is.
And then we just had a question come in from James, and I forget what industry James is in. Okay. But James says, I've been advised to negotiate salary further, even if the initial offer is what you want, because the employer wants to be sure you don't just accept numbers with vendors, for example, without first negotiating a better price when you are working for them. Do you have any thoughts on this?
No, that's absolutely correct. So perfect example, my family member was just actually getting a job in sales, right? And was excited about the amount that was given and was like, well, I don't want to push it. I'm like, you're in sales. If you don't negotiate a salary, then I'm like, as an employer, I'm like, how's this going to work? Because you're not even advocating for, you're not selling you as a product. So yes, it's important. Obviously you want to do your research because you don't want to outprice yourself. But at the same time, yes, if you, whatever initial offer you get, typically what I do when somebody would give me an offer is I would say, I'm really excited about this offer, or thank you for the offer. If I wasn't excited, then I don't tell them I'm excited. I just say thank you. But if I'm excited, thank you, I really like this offer. There are 3 things that would strengthen the conversation for me. And typically I add 3 benefits that would strengthen the conversation for me. And so those might be anything from you know, telecommuting, which is really obviously popular right now. It could also be something along the lines of, you know, employment reimbursement, or if I have to travel, you know, travel reimbursement, whatever it is. But I always kind of say, thank you for what you're giving me, but I still want to further this conversation. So I always say there were 3 things, or you could say 2 things. It could be vacation time. That may be something you want to negotiate. So again, I always say there are 3 things, 2 things that would strengthen the conversation for me. Can we speak about those things? So that's how I kind of push it a little bit further. But yes, you should push it a little bit further. All right. Okay. So these are some questions, again, that you want to anticipate. What are the key duties? They want to make sure you can speak to the key things you've done. What decisions, especially for those of you who are in a leadership position, they want to know what were the decisions that you made then, if you're calling yourself a leader. What was the most significant project or suggestion? So for any of you in project management or program management or product management for that matter, that's a really common question that you need to be prepared for. Even people in production or like procurement, I've seen that as a question as well. So that's, and I think I noted that a few of you might've been in procurement. So that's something you want to think about. How many years experience do you have with, and they're going to put in a skill. So it could be Excel, it could be whatever it is, you know. And then describe how you progress through the ranks. This is a really great, this question is a great way for you to talk about respect that you've gained in your industry. You know, because if you progress, especially in your ranks within the same company, then that means a company continued to see your value. And so, and for lots of companies, even though it doesn't seem like it anymore, right? It doesn't seem like companies really respect that or care about that. There is something about not necessarily moving you up within their company that's going to, you know, be your next opportunity, but it's about the fact that the industry acknowledges what you have to offer. These are some more questions. And this one says, explain your salary progression at your last company. Be careful. Any question about salary, they're hoping that you say what you ended with, because they want to know that last salary. So people say, well, Stacey, what if they ask me a question like this? Then how do I get around it? Again, you can just kind of be aloof with your numbers. So let's say, for example, I said, you know, I actually started off in the 60s and I got a lot of, you know, I got bonuses and things throughout. So it was a great experience. You have no idea what I started with or what I ended with, because I just said I started off in the 60s. That could have been 69,999. It could have been 60,000 even. But I said where I started off, it has no limitation as far as where I ended. So you just have to be careful with those types of questions, because they are trying to get to that number. What do you know about this position? Please know something. Believe it or not, 47% of people go to an interview and have no idea what the position really entails. So you're on the telephone talking to this person and they ask you and you have no idea what to talk about. So make sure you do your research. Why did you leave your last employer? This is a question that a lot of people stress, especially if you were terminated. So most of you were laid off, right? When you're laid off, you do not need to go into a deep explanation of being laid off. You just simply say, I was laid off. That's it, okay? If you are terminated, it is not the end of the world. You just need to be in and out with your response. So you can say the last position did not end how I wanted it to. However, I learned a lot and I'm looking to contribute again. That is it. Don't get into why you were terminated. They can't tell. You know, if somebody calls to get a reference, they cannot say why you were terminated. They just say that what they'll say is you're not eligible to be rehired. That will be the actual formal response, okay? So they're not gonna say, you know, you got in a fight with, you know, your coworker or whatever, if that was the case. They're just gonna say you're not eligible to be rehired there, okay? So I know that's a question that a lot of people, but remember, you're talking over the phone. Because they can't see you, you also need to make sure your voice does not kind of, it doesn't show the fact that you're stressed about the question. So immediately, if I'm talking to you and you're like, da 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 da, and I say, so Stacey, why'd you leave your last company? You're like, well, you know, and you give me the long sigh and I can hear your discomfort with the question. Immediately, I'm like, okay, was there more to that? Because, you know, you seem really upset still. So again, you don't want to belie that that's really what's going on in your head and your brain. How does this position fit into your long-term career plans? This question, I wish they would please like get rid of it, but unfortunately it still keeps popping up every once in a while. You know, for some people, they're like, Stacey, I want to work for 2 more years and retire. Like, that's my long-term career plan. So that's challenging to answer a question like that. So what I always tell people is, I want to work for as long as I can and make sure that this company is successful with me doing so. And that's it. Don't give them a time frame. Some of the questions, what will you do in the next 5 years? Are they going to keep you for 5 years? So the reality of, you don't even know that. So just be honest. You want to contribute to the company. Don't get into time frames or anything like that. How would you describe your ideal work environment is actually a trick question. Unless you know what that work environment is, you really don't want to respond one way or the other. All you want to say is, I'm actually, I'm amenable to any environment. I've worked in really loud environments, ones that were really deadline driven. I've worked in quieter, very siloed positions. So you have to be careful with that particular question, because they're hoping you say like, I love, the hustle and bustle. And they're like, well, our company's really slow. And you're like, ugh. So you just have to be careful with that one. Why you're the best candidate for the position, you reaffirm your skills. That's where your skills, again, are going to make a lot of noise and are really important. All right. Any questions? Are we good?
One second, Stephanie. We do have some questions.
Stacy?
Stephanie. Let me see here. Oh my goodness. So what are things that they would consider negotiating versus things that are petty and would give them concern?
So what would they consider negotiating? They consider negotiating a lot, believe it or not. Vacation time is the easiest. Start date. If the company's in so let's say you're in a position where you're applying to a company that's really about to fall apart, you can actually negotiate in a severance, believe it or not, preemptively to even taking that position. So there are lots of different things that you can actually negotiate. Travel reimbursement if you had to take the train in, parking reimbursement if you had to park in one of those $350 spots in Boston, all those things. There's lots that you can actually negotiate. Being petty would be like, and by the way, if you have to travel as a portion of your job, you can actually negotiate the rate. There's like a standard rate, and then there's a rate based on, so let's say, for example, your territory was like the Midwest where everything's much cheaper. And now your territory is going to be New York City. You can't eat for $100 on a day in New York City unless you're eating at McDonald's all day long. So, things like that, you could also negotiate. There's not, unless you were like super petty, like they gave you a car and you were like, I don't want this car. Like that would be considered petty. But much else, as long as you're doing it within reason, is pretty safe.
Mike wants to know, why do companies ask for, say, N amount years of experience in something that has only existed for half of N? So that's a little bit of an equation there. But,
I know. I'm like, I didn't know I was doing algebra. But Mike, it's one of those things that has been happening for a long time. And it was funny because it started happening when the internet, I would say 99-ish, when it was like the big explosion of everybody working in software and what have you. And people were asking for skills that did not exist and I know that because my friends that were in that field were like, Stacy, this came into being 3 years ago. How are they asking for 5+ years of experience? What I always tell people is if you have 80% of what they're asking for, then you should still go for the position. Unless it's something like language, like if they're asking for you to speak Cantonese and you don't, then clearly you don't do that. But if it's something within reason, even education, sometimes they're looking for somebody that has a bachelor's degree, maybe you have an associate's, still apply. And yeah, don't be so caught off guard and worried about that. It is annoying and it's frustrating. But yeah, they're still doing it, unfortunately.
And a few folks wanted you to repeat your response regarding termination.
Absolutely. So my response for termination is this. The last position did not end how I wanted it to. However, I learned a lot and I was able to contribute, and I'm looking to contribute again. That's it. Keep it as short and to the point, because the more you start talking, especially if you still have feelings about that, you can bring those feelings to the surface. And now the person's like, are you okay? Do you need a moment, Stacey? You're like, crud, they can hear that I'm angry still. So yeah, you want to try to keep all that stuff at bay if at all possible.
All right. You can keep moving on. And
Okay.
Just a reminder, folks, I will send out a link to this video recording. So if folks ever want a certain portion played back, they can certainly do that. I'll send the recording out tomorrow.
Excellent.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'm not sure how much longer people are going to stay, but I'm going to go through and then again, continue to ask me questions as well.
Yeah, so 1 second, Stacy.
Yep.
So I failed to set expectations when we first began. So folks, I think we're probably going to go for another 10 to 15 minutes. So we'll go past 3. We'll go until about 3:15.
Okay.
If anyone needs to drop off early, I understand. But keep going, Stacy. This has been fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. So what are your salary expectations is a question that they're going to ask. And we kind of went over that. What were you making your last position? That's a question you want to redirect. So as soon as you hear them say anything about how much you were making in your last job, just simply say, oh, what I'm looking to make moving forward is from here to here. You don't give them time to like even pivot. You have to pivot as soon as you hear it, because other than that, it's going to feel awkward for you. And you don't want to go down that pipeline because again, it could get ugly. Before you actually pivot, however, before you use that tactic, you may want to use the one that I described earlier, which is simply saying, I'm really excited about this position. What have you budgeted for this role? I, again, personally say, what have you budgeted for my skills and experience? But it's really about what your comfort level is. Everybody's a little bit different as far as that is concerned. What do you know about this company? As I said to you before, how do you see yourself contributing to this company? This goes back to your skills. Okay, so re-emphasizing your skills again. What is your greatest accomplishment? Okay, this question, I have to say, is not about your children. I have to say it because people constantly and consistently make this about their kids. I'm glad that you're proud of your children. I'm sure you've raised fantastic citizens or citizens to be, because maybe they're really young. But when they're asking this question, they want to know about your greatest employment accomplishment. When they're talking to you, they're trying to visualize your value. So talking about yourself as a parent, while it may give them some idea about some things they could anticipate as a colleague, they're really trying to figure out dollars and cents. Okay, so that's important. So it's about your greatest employment accomplishment. If you're the type of person, this little section in the purple, if you're a person that has a hard time with the pauses that are in an interview, this is a way you can get around that. So at the very beginning, you can say, really excited to talk to you today. If there's any area, when I answer the questions, if you want for me to expound or go in deeper in any area, just let me know. As soon as you say that, you're done. So that means if there's a point where there's a blank space and nobody's talking, you just have to eat the silence, because you've already said, if you need for me to go in deeper in any area, let me know. If they didn't let you know, then they don't need for you to talk. Okay, so you just have to keep that in mind. And it's a challenge, but you have to do that. These are some questions you may want to ask. I love the question number 1. What in particular interested you about my background? What did you like about my resume? I like that because if they talk about something on your resume, then that means you can expound on it. Say, skills that you've used and accomplishments that surround that. How would you describe your ideal candidate is a common question. Why? Because then you can make yourself the ideal candidate. What do you see as the biggest challenge of this role? You may get a response on this, but you may get a bunch of garbage, to be quite honest with you. So it really just depends. The person may say, the biggest challenge is XYZ, and it may be something really skill specific. If you hear them hesitate at all, or even kind of like, well, it's probably a personality conflict, but they're not, going to say that to you. So that's a little bit of an iffy question, but some people do still choose to ask that. What are your top priority projects or tasks for this position in the next 3 to 6 months? The reason why you give the 3 to 6 month parameter is because 90-day evaluations happen for everyone. So after, 3 months, right, that's your 90 days. So what you're trying to figure out is, have they looked at your position being there beyond the 90 days? Do they have forethought about that? So that's what you're trying to get to. How does this position fit into the company's long-term plans? Same idea as the question I just mentioned. And then when would I be able to meet someone at the company? This question can only be posed to someone who has a personality. If you're talking to someone on the phone who's, as I said, blank and doesn't have any ebbs and flows or peaks and valleys to their voice, you're not going to say, so when would I be able to meet someone at the company? They're like, never. Okay, that's what they're thinking. So what you could say is, I'm really excited about the position. what is the next step? That you could say instead, for the person that doesn't really have any affect or any personality. All right, that is it for the telephone. I'm just going to do a quick Skype, but if anybody has any more telephone questions before I go to that.
Ed says, I've suggested to clients when salary comes up to respond, I'm not looking to duplicate my last or present salary, and then give a range you desire as Stacy suggested. Do your pre-interview research to be realistic.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, being realistic, that's great advice, Ed. I saw you work in creative consulting, I believe I saw quickly when I was just looking through stuff. But yeah, I think that's important. I think you always do your due diligence. It's going to, one, alleviate a lot of the stress, but kind of knowing what you're about to step into. I mean, I don't want to be dramatic, but, you know, going into, or disrespectful for anybody who's former military, but it's like walking into a little bit of a battlefield when you're going to an interview. You're trying to like play mind games with the enemy, if you will, and trying to figure out exactly how to kind of go through this whole process. So it can be really stressful. So yes, any measure of due diligence, and really that's why I stress practicing what you're going to say, because you don't want to get on the phone and then kind of be bumbling all over creation. You want to already have gone through how this works for you and make yourself as comfortable and confident as possible.
Susan wants to know, what if you undersell yourself? Like, let's say the company in reality would be willing to pay more. Mm-hmm. You know, I guess you just have to live with that, huh? That's a tough one.
Yeah. So this is the thing. And I try to tell people, this is why I try to tell people not to say a dollar amount. If at all possible, you want to try to avoid that. You want them to say an amount, right? You want them to kind of say that. And then for you to do your due diligence, go to Glassdoor, see if that's what people have been getting paid. But the problem that people have been getting themselves into is they're saying an amount. And then after they say an amount or a range, then people tell them the full scope of the job. And they're like, holy cow, I should have gotten 15 grand more for what they're expecting for me to do. And it's not like you can then say to them, so I know I said 90,000, I really meant 115. Like, you know what I'm saying? You can't go back and then, or 105, you can't go back and do that. So that's why if the longer you can kind of put that off and or get a reasonable idea from them, you're in a better position to actually truly negotiate when it gets to that point.
And Stacy, Jackie wants to know if you're going to share your slides.
No. Yes, I will. I know it's Jackie. That has to be Jackie T.
That's Jackie T. That's right.
Yes, I will definitely. I will make sure to share I'll give them to Robert, and then I don't know if you're going to send it out or whatever.
I can send it out to everyone tomorrow when I send out the recording.
Yep. No problem.
Let me see. One last question for Susan, then we can move on. It's a question comment. Once you get the offer, though, you could ask for more money based on the full responsibilities of the job, correct?
You could, but the reality of it is you have to understand, once you've already kind of given them a dollar amount, that's why you even made it through this process. So, you know, the initial, when they ask you that telephone number, to give them that magic number, you're then put through the process. If let's say they were only really wanting to pay 95 and you came in at 107 immediately, right? Some companies would be like, okay, we're okay with that. But let's say you came in at 115. Most companies are going to say that's a hard pass because we're not going to even be close. That's already 20 grand difference. We're not going to like, you know, come to an agreement. So that's something that is hard pressed to change at that point. It's not to say it's impossible, because I will tell you, there's like a very unique negotiating power you have when you've made it to that point. If they've already gone through and interviewed lots of people, and, you know, they've interviewed you several times after that initial telephone interview, and they've made you an offer, they do not want to go back into the interview process. So sometimes there is a little bit of kind of flexibility, but it wouldn't be like 20 grand flexibility. So you have to make sure that potentially that's when you really go into the benefits package and getting more that way, or things like that. So that's why, as I said, 3 things that would strengthen the conversation for me, and then I add those to an offer that's maybe a little bit off for what I'm looking for. But it doesn't hurt to ask. You just have to make sure you're not pricing yourself out.
All right, we're good.
All right, so just a quick little Skype, kind of an online thing. Online interviews have taken over, as you guys are probably very well aware. So just a couple things I want you to keep in mind as you start kind of preparing for them. I'm just going to kind of go through this poll question. It says, which of these is the least important in a Skype Zoom prep? None of them. They're all important. Okay. So, you know, the type of web camera is not as important, but making sure you've tested it and it functions in the way that you would like for it to. So this is the thing. Skype, or even, you know, Zoom or whatever platform they're using, is something that companies use, especially when they were doing interviews across, like, internationally. It has now become something like from Boston to Lowell that people are using, or from Lowell to Lowell for that matter, because they don't want people to be coming in. Employers obviously do see you. So that means you need to pay attention to things like your background imagery, you know, what does your presentation look like? Are you just sitting here like stiff like this, or are you demonstrative? So there's lots of things you have to kind of pay attention to. Believe it or not, some companies are hiring just through Skype or Zoom. So they haven't even physically met you, and they're offering people positions through this method. So you have to be prepared that anything could kind of happen this way. This is actually a great YouTube. It is great for Skype, and you could, again, it really doesn't matter the platform, but it gives you certain things to really take into account and really think about or focus on. And then that is pretty much it. So these are the things that I want you guys to think about when you're preparing for a Skype. You have to make sure you're paying attention to your background, right? So your background, you don't want it to be ultra messy, but you don't want it to be a blank wall either, because that's really stark and boring. So it could be a plant. You could put a lamp behind you. I have a bookcase, as you can see, and a curtain on the other side, but you just want it to be visually a little bit different. You can obviously use the backgrounds that they give you, but you have to practice that because oftentimes people are not aware certain colors disappear. So I could move my hand and all of a sudden it's gone, right? And that's kind of odd to be talking and then magically my hand disappears. So you want to, you know, practice those types of things to utilize that properly. The other thing is you have to, again, pay attention to background noise and sounds. For example, I use a microphone on my, right now I'm using a microphone. It's called the Blue. It's got a globe like this to amplify my voice a little bit more, which means they're picking up on every sound that could potentially be in the background. So also you need to pay attention to that. Again, because this is not the telephone interview. If somebody runs behind you to go to the kitchen to get, you know, something to drink, people are seeing that. Or if, you know, you have a cat that likes to crawl across the table while you're talking, again, they're going to be able to see that. So there are lots of different concessions. I do have a webinar called Nailing the Online Interview. So any of you are welcome to attend that if you so choose to. I gave you guys the link for Mass Hire Lowell. Any of our webinars, you're more than welcome to attend those as well. And I hope that you guys really enjoyed the presentation. Hopefully it was helpful to you. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I gave you my LinkedIn, I think at the very top of the presentation. And other than that, I'm here for some questions.
Excellent. And let me just put a plug in for Stacy and for the Mass Hire Lowell Career Center. This came up actually, I think, at our last meeting. It may have been this group or the 50 plus group, but we are blessed to live in the vicinity, the area of the Mass Hire Lowell Career Center. I think we were fortunate to have one of the stronger career centers, and Stacy and Bob and the rest of them do a phenomenal job. I think their offerings are, you know, top of the class. They do a really good job, and I did want to say that, and I do mean that honestly, Stacy, that this came up actually at our last session.
Thank you.
Folks really raved about your career center.
I appreciate that. We have, but between Bob and I, we have 35 webinars. We've been training some of the other centers to do the webinars as well, so they can, you know, work with their customers from home, because we've been doing them for the longest. So I think that's obviously a benefit to us having, you know, people really enjoy them. We've been able to go through like the ebbs and the flows and the not so really well done execution. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate that so many of you guys have actually come over to join our webinars. There are so many familiar names, and I do appreciate that a lot.
Wonderful. Just a lot of thank yous in the chat. I guess we have a good question from Laura. On the phone, you can move around and be energetic, but on Zoom, you can't. How do you give a sense of energy on for the online interview?
Can you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, and there may be a word or two missing. On the phone, you can move around and be energetic.
Yep.
On Zoom, you can't. You know, you're being watched. You don't want to necessarily talk with your hands and whatnot. How do you give a sense of energy on the online interview?
So first thing, you can move around. I think there's a misconception. You guys saw me using my hands this entire time, right? So the reality of it is a couple of things you want to avoid. You don't want to show palms to the camera. So that's like a thing that you don't want to do. But let's say I was talking about working on a big project. I would do this. I was working on this big project. It still demonstrates that it's a big project. I wouldn't say I was working on this big project and then have my hands coming towards the camera, then that would be awkward. But yes, you can absolutely, move around and use your hands. You just don't want to be over, the top with it like this. Then it's like, okay, are you directing the choir? What's going on? And yes, you can move your head. You want to be demonstrative, because talking to somebody who's sitting like this for an hour is not fun. Like that's not attractive. So again, it's really, I always tell people the job search is marketing. It is marketing yourself as the product. So what makes you attractive to whomever is watching or listening or what have you?
Great. That's really it for questions. Just a lot of thank yous. A lot of people agreeing with me that Lowell has the best career center. So
thanks, guys.
yeah. So just want to put a plug in for next week, which actually dovetails nicely with this week. Next week, we'll be talking about your legal rights during the interview and application process. And tomorrow, I will send out an email with both a link to this recording, and also as an attachment, I'll have Stacy's slides. So I think we'll be in good shape. I want to thank, we had a great turnout. I think we had 37 people at the peak.
That's awesome.
That's great. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Especially want to thank Stacy, who did a great job as usual. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks again, Stacy. Big round of applause to Stacy.
Thanks, guys. Big round of applause for you. Thank you guys so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
And we'll be wrapping up the session now. Sorry we went a few minutes late, but it was worth it. You did great, Stacy.
Thank you so much.
All right. Everyone have a good one. Bye-bye.